It's showtime.
Down to business. I got my wild cherry Diet Pepsi, and I got my blackjack gum here, and I got that feeling. Yeah, that familiar feeling that something rank is going down out there.
Gutter.
It's a nice spot.
Gutter.
It's a nice spot. It's a nice spot. It's a nice spot. It's a nice spot.
And if you can't believe it, it's a Friday once again.
Good. You're not coming home. Where can I go then? You can go to the gutter where you belong, you filthy pig.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Huh? Greetings! Welcome to the gutter. We live in a world that worships echoes, but ignores the original song. A society that builds its modern pantheon on a framework of an idea so ahead of its time that the faintly competent copies are thought too unique not to be original thoughts. You know the copies all too well. They are colorful and marketed across lunchboxes, movie posters, and action figures. They've graced the covers of pulp magazines during the height of that boom, and they were the launching pad of cape shit comic books and feature films. The Doc Savage Code all the way to truth, justice, and the American way, where might is used to right wrongs, and everyone blindly cheers. But let's turn back a page tonight to a different kind of story. One where power is a burden, where being more than human doesn't make you a hero, it makes you a tragedy. And it's a world where the strongest man alive learns a cruel and simple truth, that no matter how high you leap, no matter how fast you can run, no matter how many good deeds you do, you can never escape human nature. But don't worry, you don't need to remember it. You've never heard it before. Just go back to your bright and simple myths and forget that this ever existed after you leave the gutter. I am your host, Aldous. Here's my co-host, JP. JP, how are we doing tonight?
Oh, good, man. I got a belly full of peanut butter chicken, and I'm ready to chop it up and talk some comics.
Awesome. Peanut butter chicken?
Yeah, like the Chinese buffet, they have, I think it's like fried chicken thighs, and the sauce is like 90% peanut butter.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. That's General Carter's chicken, right?
Yeah. It's John Carter's chicken.
John Carter's chicken. There you go. Let's check the chat. We got Eric Grant talking. Yes, I may have missed the last dozen, but I'm early enough to get first. Excellent, Eric Grant. Great to see you, man. Thank you for joining us. He also says, I've been enjoying Thomas's stuff on Doctor Strange and Defenders. Yeah, we're going to get into that. Roy Thomas is a favorite here of everybody on the gutter for sure. Citizen Ronan says, against my better judgment, I am here. And thank you for watching. Just here to watch. Good to see you. Just here to watch. I was told to come here. Well, thanks for stopping by. Citizen Ronan also says, Underoos. Don't forget the Underoos. Indeed. Now, I do have a little bit of upkeep here. It's been a while, but our executive producer reached out, and unfortunately I was tied up most of the day, so he just left me a voicemail. And as has become tradition, when our executive producer calls and leaves a voicemail for me, I share it with all of you. So without further ado,
Hey, Aldous. Sorry I haven't reached out to you in a while. I've had to keep a low profile with the new administration. Apparently I didn't renew my Tarjeta Verde for at least 17 years. So I'm getting some help from a good friend, fellow ape American, Elon Musk. He is at least 50% ape from what I can tell. You just look at the way he walks. He's got what we like to call a chimp limp. Anyway, I'll be working with him to get an H-1B, start working at a local 7-Eleven, gain my residency back. If things go south, your next payment comes in pesos. If it gets really bad, it's going to be Canadian. But you're going to get paid regardless. Speaking of H-1Bs, I got a new idea for Raiden. Call it JP in Jaipur. So we drop Raiden into the middle of India, have him try out the various street vendors there. The real moneymaker isn't the videos, though. It's the over-under in Vegas. Because right now, they don't think he can last like 4 days on Indian street food. I know his stomach better than anybody else, except for yourself, of course. And, I figure he can go about 6 days before his gallbladder bursts. So anyway, beyond that, thinking of starting a new non-profit for the gutter. Something to give ourselves a bit of a charitable face here. So we're going to have draw streams where people draw their favorite characters from the knees up in an effort to raise funds for underprivileged comic creators so that they can get tickets to the movies. Call it Best Foot Forward. Call me back sometime. Let me know what you think. In the meantime, hasta luego.
and there you go.
Wow,
Hasta
that was
luego,
exhaustive.
indeed. Best Foot Forward apparently is coming. We'll have to get in touch. The chimp JP will just put peanut butter on it. Yes, indeed, he will.
I mean, I was going to say I would be shitting myself within 24 hours, but I hear that you can do that anywhere there.
Yeah, there is that option. You don't even have to bring a shovel.
Yeah, they have designated streets.
Well, enough of that. Tonight, we will be covering Marvel Preview issue number 9 from April of 1977. I believe. Let me check my notes. Yep, April of 1977. This issue is readily available. I consider it collectible, and I've always been shocked that even with that fantastic Earl Norem cover that you're looking at, this is valued like $3 to $7. Like most places, you can get it for under $5, even in pretty decent condition. But we'll get into it. But it is an adaptation by Roy Thomas. And here's Roy. Obviously, this is from November of 2024, still going strong. And Tony DeZuniga, who was part of the Filipino invasion of the 70s. He was actually a student of Alfredo Cala, but sadly he has since passed. But these two gentlemen put together a wonderful, wonderful adaptation of the first half of Philip Wylie's. Here's Mr. Wylie. His fantastic book, Gladiator. And Gladiator was released in 1930 as a novel. And here you go. Here's the original cover of it.
Well, just
And
the stark visual contrast between the prose writer and the comic creators is stunning.
yeah, well, you got to remember, man, this is also he's a generation before these guys, right?
Hmm.
Roy Thomas himself is obviously famous. We love him here on the Gutter because of his work on Savage Sword, in addition to everything else he did, but especially Savage Sword. You can quote me on this. I've said it repeatedly. No one writes Robert E. Howard better than either Robert E. Howard or Roy Thomas. Thomas has a deep passion for a lot of the early pulp stuff and some of the stuff even that came before pulp, in quotation marks, finger quotes, like Mr. Wylie's book, Gladiator. And tonight, what we are looking at is like I said, the Marvel Preview, issue number 9, adaptation of Wylie's book. Now, this is, it's only been adapted in comic form twice. The other time was by Malibu Comics in the form of Legend, which was a 4-issue series inspired by Philip Wylie's novel Gladiator. It's not as faithful as an adaptation as I feel that this one that Mr. Thomas and DeZuniga worked on. It's still fun and also readily affordable. You can get these issues for just a couple of bucks each. But just diving right in to the issue itself, Braden, did you get a chance to read any of the back matter that's in this? Either of the essays?
I didn't. I apologize.
Oh
If
no,
you want
I
to
didn't.
wrap my knuckles with a ruler, I'll understand.
No, I didn't expect you to. They're both kind of esoteric, and unless you're really into, well, basically the stuff that I'm into, you're really not going to find them interesting. If you're into pulp inspirations and where stuff comes from, then you're going to be riveted because they are fantastic. The first is just a little biography on Philip Wylie himself, and just kind of who he was. He was a very prolific author. He published a number of novels and highly influential novels. There's a lot of great guys, fantastic authors and comic book creators that reference his work as an inspiration for their stuff. And the other was at the very end, and I thought I included it, but apparently I didn't. So let me pull those pages up real quick while JP fills airtime.
Well, I mean, I might be jumping like way ahead here, but the thing that I was wondering, I had many questions for you about this book, is how does this fit into the subsequent narrative about deconstructing characters in your estimation?
Well, I think okay, so in order to answer that question, we've got to go back a little bit. And the last back matter one is this, and this is Supermen in science fiction. And it's an excellent introduction to what I'm about to talk about. From whether it's Doc Savage or Superman, and it doesn't matter which one came first, because we're talking about themes here. And it really, I think it was Hostman. Somebody was talking to me this week. They got some Supreme issues. And, he was talking about, oh man, these are great. And like, yeah, they are great. At that era, those were the best quote unquote Superman stories. When Alan Moore was writing Supreme, those were the best Superman quote unquote stories out there. But it all goes back to Wylie. It all goes back to Gladiator. And the reason it all goes back to Gladiator is because it's one of the first examples of the quote unquote Supermen in science fiction. And what Gladiator is it's a proto superhero novel that follows a gentleman named Hugo Danner. And he's a man born with superhuman strength, speed, and near invulnerability due to an experimental serum that his scientist father developed. So you've already got connections to Superman, Doc Savage, and Captain America. He grew up in rural Colorado, and he struggles with his abilities, as opposed to all of these other great heroes that are worshipped by society. Every time Hugo does anything with his powers, people are aghast. They're shocked. They revile him. They might celebrate the event, but they're just terrified by what he presents. And no matter how many times he tries to use his powers, whether it's excelling in sports or attempting to serve in World War I or trying to seek political and social influence, each one ends in a different layer of disillusionment. Society either rejects his gifts or tries to exploit them, and he always feels alienated. And it's a unique concept that isn't deconstructed in all of the other works that I feel are children of this novel. They're constructed upon. It's the opposite. They build it up, whereas Wylie starts off at almost the deconstruction, the original deconstruction of showing you the disillusionment of all these powers. Everybody after him kind of builds it up, and then later in the late 70s, early 80s, you start to see the themes that Wylie really puts into this book that Hugo deals with as a person back into the thing. So you're looking at like 50 years, 2 generations, arguably, that it was framed as a constructionist view before you return to the original 1930 ideology of the deconstruction of the superhero that at the time wasn't even deconstruction, because this is an original novel that really doesn't have a whole lot of things that you can credit that were its source. It's unique, and the way it weaves its way in and out of inspiration for everything that came after it is fantastic, in my opinion, and that's why I wanted to talk about it.
What was its reach like for people who have never heard of this before, including me?
It sold fairly well. It wasn't like a bestseller, but it sold fairly well, and then drifted off into pretty much obscurity up until basically the late 70s, when it was adapted by Roy Thomas. This book actually rejuvenated Gladiator's sales numbers. It's been republished multiple times since then, as almost everything from that era has been. You can go on Amazon right now and find a number of reprints that are available. It's an okay book. If you're really into pulp stuff, if you like Robert E. Howard, if you like John Carter from Mars, if you like Tarzan, if you like Burroughs, if you like that stuff, that era of writing, definitely check it out. You're going to love it. If you're not familiar with any of it, it's really not the entry door to walk into. There's other avenues that are better on-ramps into that genre of literature. But check it over. We got Well Read Comics has joined us. Great to see Well Read. Always a pleasure. Yo, Aldous. Great to see you, man. Thanks for stopping by. Awesome one's here. Dude. Great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. And Jason Sandberg is here. Wonderful to see Mr. Sandberg. So yeah, with that kind of out of the way, and like I said, there's only the one other adaptation, but the one thing that Roy Thomas was really, really awesome at, and still is, arguably, is taking something that he loves and presenting it in a sequential art form that is a faithful representation of the novel. And while it may not always work, there's multiple issues of Savage Sword that, while fantastic, don't work necessarily as a comic book. This actually does work pretty well, I think, as a whole. So kind of moving right in, we get this great splash page immediately when we open it up, and it just introduces the character. It shows you a little bit, gives you a nice little narration splash. And we move from that into kind of the context of the story, and it's showing Hugo as he's going through his life, as is right now. We jump into just a scene, and we see how his powers and his strength and his speed and his invulnerability allow him to do things that no other man is capable of. And we get this really wonderful fight scene where he jumps in the water and he starts fighting sharks to save a fellow crew member on this ship. And I guess before I get into it, did you have any thoughts here on some of these initial opening? What was your thought, actually? Because it starts off with this beat where we're showing you the slice of life of where he's at now, today. And then we go back and we start explaining where the character comes from. What did you think of that introduction?
Well, I mean, my first thought was, I think this is something Aldous is really going to like, because I know you like introductions like that kind of jump around temporally. It's not my cup of tea for storytelling. I'm very much a linear storyteller, but I would say my initial impressions of the book were, as a word guy, as somebody who tends to focus on story and dialogue more than anything, this was a book that I just found myself kind of gazing at the art for long periods of time.
Is that a indictment of the writing, or was it because the art was that good?
Because the art was that good.
Okay. And that, I think we need to pause right there, and we've got a couple people joined. Paulus Arts has joined us. Great to see you, man. Thanks for joining us. And Kayla's here. Great to see Kayla. And Hostman just walked in. It's the gutter. Everyone ends up here eventually. Exactly. Kayla says this is a beautiful book. It is, with a few exceptions, and we're going to get to those. Tony DeZuniga, the artist on this, is, as I said, he's one of the Filipino invasion guys. He studied under Alcala. His pencils and his inks are fantastic. However, a lot of the Marvel Preview stuff, and I guess let me take a step back and explain what Marvel Preview was. Marvel Preview was an attempt to do something that opened doors. They could present stories. Blade was introduced in Marvel, or Blade had stories. Star-Lord had stories. Punisher had stories. They were opening doors, trying to tell different stories and see what caught fire, what really sold well. And then they could kind of do subgenres off of that. They'd also do historical adaptations. Solomon Kane, Sherlock Holmes. They would do anything they could just to kind of see like what's the market looking for, and do these great little one-offs. Sadly, with issue 9, this did not really have any kind of an impact in sales or culturally. So we don't even get a full adaptation of Wylie's book. We only get the first half. And that's one of the reasons why Howard Chaykin, with artist Russ Heath, did the Malibu adaptation. Chaykin was famously a big fan of Wylie's work and wanted a full adaptation to be done, and that's why they did those Legend books that I showed you earlier. But also, the legs that some of what DeZuniga and Thomas have done here is huge. If you're familiar at all with the European bande dessinée of Carthago, there's a lot of influence in these first pages for this adaptation that influenced some of what goes on in Carthago. And if you're not familiar with Carthago, don't worry, we will be covering it later this year here on the Gutter, and I'll be sure to make a callback to that.
Before we move on, though, are there any animal anatomy experts that want to criticize like fin proportion or anything like that here?
We'll get Quiet Red Media join. It's great to see Quiet Red. Carthago's the shark book. Yes, Carthago is colloquially known as the shark book. Yes. I love the shark book. Yes, it's the shark book. And Zaid Comics has joined us. Hello, my dudes. No, and it's, as you go through this, and this is, I guess I've got one more critique I need to say. So a lot of times I'll talk about what I call the slip sliding effect, which is where you'll get a book and you open it up and the cover's great, and you open it up and you get that splash page is right there, and you're like, yes, this is awesome, and you're reading it. And then as you turn the pages, as you get into the actual meat of the book, the art just drifts off and becomes just terrible. And it's a total facsimile of what was originally in those first few pages, because the quality is just dipping down as the artist moves through. DeZuniga doesn't do that here. His art gets better as the book goes through. It's a little weak in the first few pages, and then it just takes off and it gets better. But this shark fight extends for quite a bit, and the panel layouts are fantastic. They're not something I would normally recommend because the eyeline placement is a little strange. Yeah. But my God, they're energetic, and there's kinetic energy just built in to every single one. You get that impression of like that third panel where he's prying the jaws open, and then you do the inset where he's prying the jaws open, and you get the sense that there's strength and there's action there. And it's just wonderful understanding from the art of how to accentuate that aspect of the story.
And like it's so brutal, like the description of like tearing at its brain.
Yeah, Hostman says cover artists are the greatest liars in modern day comics. Yes, for sure. And he says, I hate seeing amazing cover art for someone like Amanda Conner or Kevin Eastman and outsourced South American slop. Ain't that the truth, man? And Kayla says, I love them. I think they work as movement to me. It's conveying their underwater and the force. No, you get that sense of force. You get that sense of strength. And that's one of the things that DeZuniga consistently does throughout this entire book, is really give you that sense of his strength. Because, again, Hugo is the first great superhero. He's got amazing strength. He's got amazing speed. He is invulnerable. And he's ultimately just a good guy trying to help out. And at every turn, he is thwarted. And we get this nice closeout of the fight scene after everything's been resolved. And little heavy on the dialogue, but the dialogue is pretty well done in accordance with the novel. A little clunky maybe at times. I get the impression the more I read this, the more I feel that it was rushed. I don't know why, but if you read the novel and then you read this, I think your takeaway might be something different. Maybe that's just mine.
Well, a couple things. I would be willing to put money on the fact that shark fight was an inspiration for a shark fight involving Brock Sampson, in case anybody happens to get that. But also, how did you feel about having to read French?
I don't mind it. It's fine. But in that first extended panel, and again, man, this is 1977, and we've got a full page, 1/3 panel all the way down that extends that. And at the bottom, we see a little bit of what I talked about earlier with the arm proportions to the torso are just a little off. And it's just a little awkward. You go up to panel 2 and it's again with the arm. It's just a little long and things are just a little off, but it doesn't bother me that much because this page, I think, flows really well. And man, I'm just blown away by the fact I get that 1/3 panel that stretches all the way down the left side. Really, really love seeing that. It's something that tragically is not used enough. And we got some comments here. We got Raiden, you're staticky, says Kayla.
Am I?
I didn't think so.
Check. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're talking from like a ham radio.
Oh, does it? Let me check my settings. Maybe mine's messed up.
Either that or you have a patient that's flatlining behind you.
Ah, that's entirely possible. There we go. Is that any better?
I think so.
All right.
How about me? Do.
Toast. But yeah, so thank you for that. Appreciate you guys checking in on our audio. But as we move through, we get more action as he fights some thieves, and again, you get that sense of power. You get that sense of dynamic motion that we always talk about. Where does the
dynamism?
The action happens in the gutter. You see the prequel to the moment in the panel, and then you see the resultant in the next panel. So you get some nice there. The one interesting thing is there's no sound effects in that bottom panel that takes up 2/3 of the page. Beautifully well done. I really like that they angle things. And that's one of the things that DeZuniga does really well throughout this book is your backgrounds are all slightly pitched. So it's not quite square. Nothing's ever at a perfect 90. Everything's kind of twisted just enough. And it's twisted in the direction of motion. So it just adds to that sense that there's weight to the action that's going on. Really, really well done.
Also good visual cues, because that one guy, he's evil, he's bad because he's wearing horizontal stripes.
Yes, we got Kayla, Lordess of the People of the Coast with the most, yo. There you go. Well done. But then we slow it down a little bit. And again, down there, we get some nice panel work. Really, really nice blacks, too. When shadows are done in this book, done very, very well. Nice gradient work. But we get down to that panel and you see Hugo, and again we've got the arm issues where just the anatomy is just a little off, and it's just enough to really bug me. This goes away about 1/3 into the book, and it doesn't bother me as much. But in this first third, I'm just kind of just grinding my teeth a little bit for moments here, and it's just moments. And then we get into the background story. We explain where did Hugo come from, and Hugo's father developed a super serum, and he injects his pregnant wife. And again, I mean, what were your thoughts on this? Because you're coming into this cold. You're not familiar with the novel. I'm sure you're colloquially familiar with, Superman, with Doc Savage, with Captain America, all the greats from comicdom. What are your thoughts? Did you see connections?
I mean, no, sorry. I saw connections to how utterly hilarious this backstory is, especially the cat. Also, that cat in that panel looks terrible. What is it? I mean, it looks like a villain human being's face on a cat head.
It does. There is kind of a little bit of a human expression quality going on with that cat, for
And
sure.
the idea of like a cat just taking down a cow and being impervious to bullets is awesome.
Indeed.
Also,
Indeed.
like
So,
interesting prenatal care back in that day.
right, and I think this is, if you look at how structured this page is, we're very blocky. We're breaking gutter lines. We're playing a lot with, again, that dynamic motion of moving the eye across the page. We're all over the place as far as going back to what we talk about with rhythm and beats on this page. And then we go like completely free jazz, man. And we take the gutters completely away. The only structure on this page are the letters. And honestly, it's the thing I hate the most. Like, I want
Really?
those letters to be floating. I don't want them in boxes. I don't need them in boxes. If you're going to do this, pull that rigid line away and just let those words flow. Like, in my opinion, like, this should be almost like, and this is something you could do in like Eudaimonia because it jives with your style, is make them flow around the images a little bit so you get a sense of just like, this is, you're moving through time with him as he grows, right? And you get these moments where he's exhibiting his power and his strength. And then we jump right back into that rigidity and we're right back into the story. And again, we get that I pulled this page explicitly just for those bottom two panels. Not so much the reaction for, but that throw is fantastic.
Oh, well, I think we appreciated different things about it because one of the things I really enjoyed about this book was the facial reactions that people have.
Yes, they're speaking of that, we'll cover those in just a minute. Kayla says that cat is my spirit animal. Citizen runs his finger snaps. I agree with all this. Take away the boxes. I kind of picture that like a Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, exactly. You're getting it. Like, I'm hip, daddy. I'm hip. Yeah, man. Yeah, you're getting it. Free those illegals from those boxes. No. Then I like the faces in the last panel. Yes, and that's what JP was going into with the facial reactions. And we have a couple of facial reactions that JP wanted to talk about throughout this book.
I mean,
just
the face
like you
is
with
great.
the cat. Somehow you injected him. You've defied all the laws of God and man.
I mean, the face is great, but if you were to just post this panel without any of the context, it's like a masterpiece in and of itself.
Oh, it's absolutely, it's a beautiful panel. And that's, I think this is a little bit later in the book, but the next one is even better. Hugo was rigid. His first gesture was to lift his clenched fist and search for an object to smash it with. He looks stoned.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there's a meme that kind of this face reminds me of, and it's when she keeps sucking.
Then his rage passed. It would have to record a giant vent had it occurred 2 days sooner. He relaxed.
Oh, he relaxed.
Hey-yo. And then we get to the next page where I have to talk about something, and that is what is going on in panel 2. And this is the last moment that I really had a major problem with. But I'm not sure what's going on there, but we've got a cross-eyed kid, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one eye is too low, and I think it's the one on the left.
Yes, just a little bit. Where's Mike? We got Mike.
A little heavy-handed.
Yeah, just a little, right there.
A little heavy-eyed.
And then we go into this, and now he's playing. He goes in and he starts playing. He goes to college. He's playing football, and again, man, I love the bottom 2/3 of this page. It's just groundbreaking stuff, fantastic. And you can see where, if you're familiar, we haven't covered nearly enough of Chaikin's work, but you can see where Chaikin would be inspired by this, and this would be something that he would gravitate to, because that is like a Chaikin page. And then moving down into, some of the other stuff, we're back to that rigid storytelling, but it works. And again, down there at the bottom, we got the Flatiron Building, and we're twisting it a little bit. But what's weird about that bottom panel is we're only twisting like 2/3 of the image, just slightly. We're not twisting the entire left side, which I didn't get. I don't know if I'm like being too critical here, but it feels like things should all be drifting to the right and not just the 2/3 of the right. But
also interesting that in the third panel there, that apparently he played for the Washington Commanders, like what, 100 years before they even existed?
Yeah, there you go. It's from the past, but the future. And then we get some boxing, again, dynamic action, again, great understanding of how to do the action, how to show the result. And again, what are we seeing there in we got panel 1, action, panel 2, a reverse. How many times have we talked about that here on the Gutter, of if you want to show something in motion, just invert the camera and flip to a 180, and then we get that great power punch at the end. We get the result down at the bottom. Again, the art in this is, for the most part, like I said, there's those moments, but man, there are so many panels that are just absolutely killer in this. And then I thought this was honestly the weakest page in the book. And it just, I hate it when you do these dumb, like, let me show you the letter that he's reading. It takes so much away. Like, show him holding the letter, and then just do the letter in the narration, or have him read it aloud. Like, you don't need to show it. I like the face edition, but even that just seems kitschy for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, can you go back a page?
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of give another example of, and I know that you said that it's an adaptation, but like to look at the very last thing that's being said on that page. Sorry, sir, I'm a student, not a fighter. Now that you've paid me, I'll be leaving. You could have just said, sorry, sir, I'm a student, not a fighter, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, we understand everything else.
Right, and if you needed to add an impetuous of him leaving, he could just say, I've got to go. But I don't think there's any added impetuous that he needs to leave at that point in the story. But moving forward, again, we get great structure, great layout. He returns to college. He goes back to his team after spending some time with some women, and he goes to play a game, and he's invulnerable. He's strong. He's fast. So he puts his hand out to block a guy, and you get that snap. This is 1977, so it's after the Gwen Stacy moment, but you still get the snap. And then he runs down and he scores a touchdown and he celebrates, but he turns around and finds out he killed somebody.
Yeah, be Christian Okoye them.
There you go. And again, what are we looking at? We're looking at a 9-panel grid. So it just really, really great work, great emotion. So he leaves college, he goes, now we're back on the ship. We're back to where we started in the story. We've caught up, and then we proceed with that storyline. And then we get into, now he's going to fight into the war. He's going to get off the ship, because again, every action, every time Hugo does something positive, he gets a negative response from those around him. So he constantly jumps from event to event. And this is only covering the first half of the novel. So it's like him understanding that no matter what he does, it's always going to be construed as the negative, and he's got to move on. He's got to find somewhere else to go. It's the antithesis of what you'd expect for a superhero story. And I think that's why I love it so much, because it's so unique for its time. But we get more great, and this is the best part of the book for me, because, man, I love my war comics, and they really hit home with the World War I. That final panel is my favorite. Right there, where it's just everybody else is getting mowed down by the Maxims, and he's just standing, the bullets are bouncing off of him because he's invulnerable. I thought that page was just fantastic. And this page is great, says Kayla. And Tumor is back. I don't know if that's a reference to Filikov's tumor that we talked about or what. But we get more of the invulnerable. It's his response. He's just decimating the enemy because he realizes that he can do anything pretty much.
Mm.
And then we get more just fantastic action.
That leaping, the leaping and having him in the background like that coming at you is fantastic.
Yeah, no, all of this is just so good. Really, it's really hitting its strides in its later portion here. He's picking up pieces of artillery, he's throwing them around again. We're getting that leap, and everybody's celebrating because he's so good at what he does. And then you start seeing the cost. You start seeing, and man, I think you don't. Again, you mentioned it. The facial expressions are great, but that final facial expression of him at the bottom of the page is absolutely fantastic. You sense all of the emotion that Roy Thomas has built up with his dialogue and his narration, and DeZuniga just hits it out of the park with encapsulating it within that one panel. Just absolutely fantastic stuff. And again, we show the loss as we recoup, and again, a dynamic page that's doing a lot of those angled stuff. Again, this is 77, so while this isn't new, it's still kind of experimental, and they're playing with stuff. And it's nice to see different things. The tragedy of this being that we're in 1977 and there's more original stuff going on with how our panels are laid out in a lot of these pages than you see today in modern comics, either whether they're indie or mainstream. You're still seeing dynamic stuff. And this is the one thing I do want to press pause a little bit on the analysis of this issue and just say, like, what do you think happened? Because you've read enough issues now that you've seen enough modern stuff versus old stuff. Like, why do you think the experimentation of how panel layout is constructed and story progression is done? Why do you think it seemed to plateau?
Well, I mean, across any medium of entertainment, when was the last time we reached a kind of golden age of creativity? Like, everything is basically streamlined now, no matter what medium you're talking about.
But why is that? Like, why do you? Because I'm even seeing it in the indies. I don't see this level of creativity as often as I would assume that like this kind of stuff would be the stuff that should inspire, right? Because this is 2 generations ago, and in my head, it's always 2 generations ago that everything should be big right now. That's just how I work. I mean, if you think about like Cowboys and Indians, when was Davy Crockett big? When was Cowboys and Indians big? When were Westerns at their peak? When were noir films at their peak? Like, as you're going through that, it's always 2 generations back that you get the call back to the great. We should be celebrating this kind of stuff right now. And it seems lost. We seem stuck perpetually in this, like, nothing happened before the 80s at times in comic design for whatever reason.
Sure.
And Kayla says, a lack of good editorial and shitty writers. Well, you're not wrong on either one of those accounts. And then also we had people trying to do something new. Right, but where is that now? Like, I should see a huge crop of young artists that are pushing the envelope even harder than what Tony's doing here. And I shouldn't be looking at this 50 years later and going like, wow, this is just fantastic. It's so revolutionary. It's been 50 years. It's been half a century. Like, come on, man. Like, where's this now? You know what I mean? Where is this relative to what's around it in its era today? Who's doing that? And somebody, if you find it, point me there, please. I want to see it. They are scared to try something out of the box. Maybe, but they're artists. They should be pushing the envelope at all times and experimenting and trying things new and try different forms, do something cool. Even if it's look at what Chaykin was able to do with American Flag, or even his adaptation of The Star's My Destination, which we reviewed on this show with Dean 2 years ago. But again, we go from that experimentation, we get kind of free form and playful with where we're going, and then we drift back. We drift back into that structured grid for storytelling. But even then, Tony can't contain himself. And you get these great vivid flashbacks in that center column for panels 3, 4, and 5. And we're kind of blending. We're playing with the gutter lines again. And then we drift back in. And then we get that page earlier that you mentioned, JP, with the facial expression. And then we get, I think, which is just a fantastic end to the first half of this epic, great single shot of him standing, which is a really nice closing point, that he's kind of gone through all of these events. that have shaped him, where he constantly does good things and uses his powers for benefit and is ridiculed, or, you know, the people around him exhibit fear because he's different. And then you get this moment where he's kind of self-accepting to move into the second half of the story, which is the tragicness of this that we never got to finish because this never really took off with the audience. So kind of close, I guess that's going to kind of close us out here. But
well, what's going on with those legs there?
Well, I think part of that's the pants, because it's still in World War I, so that's part of his uniform, that the pants are flared. They're like riding pants.
Oh, like MC Hammer.
Yes, like MC Hammer, exactly.
Did you find it at all? Do you think that, and again, I'm asking, I don't know, you know, about the adaptation, but do you think the story would have worked better if he went off to war with somebody he didn't meet the night before, and maybe had something where he had an actual, like, he made a connection with somebody, a friend, and he knew that person for a little while longer before they went off to war together?
You know, there's young Indiana Jones did that, I think, better, with where they had the two storylines in Young Indy, where it was him as a boy and then him in like his late teens, early 20s. And there was the whole sequence where he meets Remy, who's a Belgian, and they both enlist in the Belgian army together, and then they're fighting World War II, and they get separated, and then they come back together in a convalescence hospital after Remy was wounded, and so was Indy, and they kind of have that moment, and that's in this book. There's kind of a moment where he's no longer on the front lines, he's in the back, and he comes across a gentleman that he knew, and they shake hands. He's like, "Look me up after the war," and that plays into the second half that was never adapted, because there's a bond there because he saved him. And I think that's the part that's missed, because you're only getting part one, is he enters the war, because that's the thing. Hugo can't have any relationships. There's no long-term relationships here because people fear him because he's different. He has these superpowers. So what you get the reactions and the relationships of those people. It's not the people around him, it's the people he saves. They look up to him. And so that's where the relationship comes from. And then that's later, in my opinion, where you see Wylie's Gladiator influence Doc Savage and influence Superman and influence a lot of the other heroes that came after, because it's the relationships formed by those they save. You could even argue that that's a key aspect of the Shadow, because the Shadow pulls people out of bad situations and makes their situation better for them, and then they become an agent of the Shadow. And then they're helping him on his journey to fight crime. So I think that concept, that nugget that's at the source of this, is seen throughout that. But your hero needs to remain isolated for how Wylie has constructed him. I think that's vitally important.
And we should always appreciate that woman's shirt is so artfully torn open.
Oh, that's just, and then as Paul Sart says, no wonder I love that cover, Earl Norham. Absolutely. Earl Norham is obviously the master at making just enough skin. Just enough. But yeah, so I really love this adaptation. It's fantastic. The issue is very affordable. If you appreciated anything you saw tonight, I recommend you go out and get it. The essays at the end, like I mentioned, there's one on just...
Oh, yeah. What did I miss there?
Well, one's just a background of Wylie and who he was as an author and what he wrote. He really only has I think he wrote 74 books. He's got 4 that are pretty influential. Nothing that's like groundbreaking. Gladiator's kind of the one that is heralded the most. The other at the end is just kind of an expose of what we've talked about tonight. It's Superman and science fiction, and it's how Gladiator influenced a lot of the other fiction that came after Wylie's Gladiator in 1930 up till about 1960, and where you see the tendrils of what Wylie wrote about extend beyond, kind of in the same way of like what Lensman did. For what Lensman did at the time, for that book, that 5 or 6, is it 5 or 6? I think it's 5 book series that was done by, oh man, who wrote that? Doc. Gonna have to look that one up. That was by, if you're not familiar with Lensman, Lensman was by E. Doc Smith. And that's Triplanetary in 48, First Lensman in 50, Galactic Patrol in 50, Gray Lensman in 51, Second Stage Lensman in 53, and Children of the Lens in 54. And you don't have Green Lantern if you don't have Wylie writing Gladiator, who then inspired part of what Doc Smith did with Lensman. And it's really kind of spooky on how much similarities, how much was lifted. But we've talked about that a little bit before in some of the old pulp stuff of how much stuff is almost directly carbon copy lifted. Not like Bob the Human Xerox Machine Kane directly lifting the entire story of Partners in Peril for the first issue of Batman, but pretty damn close. Awesome One says, just the nip. Oh, no, that's on Thursday when we, or Wednesday's show when we talk about racist Batman. Just the nip. His He-Man was my favorite. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
What do you think of the changing of the title and what they ultimately landed on? Do you think it could have been better?
Yeah, I don't know why they chose Man God. It's for obvious reasons, because he is a god amongst men. He's invulnerable. He's got infinite strength. He's got infinite speed. But at the same time, I don't understand why then you bury the lead.
I think God amongst
below.
men would have been a better title.
Exactly. Or just call it, the greatest gladiator, or just the gladiator.
Or he's an American. Call it American Gladiator.
You could, and you could do. You could call it the Fighting American, but then you would actually have to cite the creators of the Fighting American, and we all know a creator that didn't do that once they bought the rights to it.
Maybe since he doesn't seem very happy, he could be not very Gladiator. Or how about
the sad
Gladiator? Yeah, or Gladiator. I barely know her.
Oh, there you go. But I think that is going to do us for us this evening. I am going to drop the link in the chat so you can join us in the back room if you so desire. And again, I have to add the new caveat that don't be a douche if you join the back room. We're just here to have fun. Eric Grant reminding me why I love. Well done, man. So yeah, this is Marvel Preview Presents Man God, issue number 9 from April 1977 that we've been talking about tonight. Art was by the fantastic Tony DeZuniga, part of the Filipino invasion, student of all-time gutter favorite Alfred Akala, and written by none other, adapted from Philip Wylie's novel Gladiator by the one, the only Roy Thomas, who is just a national treasure. And God bless him, man. I don't think we're talking about Philip Wylie's Gladiator in 2025 if it wasn't for the stuff that Roy Thomas did on Savage Sword, which really brought Robert E. Howard back, but also his appreciation for so much of the great literature that happened in the 20s and the 30s, and how he was able to pull that forward and let it influence not only his work, but do adaptations like this that pulls that forward and exposes new generations to great literature, American literature, that is woefully underread. So dropping that link in the chat now. So there it is. You are welcome to join us in the back room. And on that note, JP, I will give you the last word before I fire up the outro.
Well, since you didn't ask, this is a recommend from me for what that is worth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not much.
There you go. Yes, it does carry it carries a light recommend for me. It's not for everybody, but if you liked the art, I do recommend the actual novel. If you can get that on Amazon fairly cheaply. This issue, as I said, under $5, you should be able to score a copy. I do recommend it. If you're interested in that pulp influence era. If not, if you're more of a cape shit guy, probably not your bag. But if you're looking for something that's different, man, you can't go wrong for sure. But that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us in the gutter.
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days, man, the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.